Hi, hello, everyone. Mikki and Michelle back today, and we are going to be talking about self-sabotage and what it is, common ways that we all self-sabotage in certain or throughout our lives. Maybe even today, we're still self-sabotaging on some aspects, and then what we can do about it. So this came about, I think, maybe last time we chatted because I think I was seeing some self-sabotaging going on with some of my athletes, but some of it self-sabotage is right. There's two types. There's unconscious and there's conscious, right? And so I think some of the things that we see athletes doing, it's like, okay, well, they didn't know, or we have forgotten. So right now, a lot of athletes are in the mainland. It's hot in Hawaii all the time, so you guys don't get the fluctuations. But on the mainland, and in Colorado in particular, it seems to go from, well, I always joke it's like winter and then it goes to mud season, which is like in the mountains, it's just everything's muddy. And that's pretty brief, but it's actually glorious because there's no tourist. So I actually like mud season. And then it goes to like summer, right? Especially down Denver, Boulder, along the Front Range, along the plains. It can go from, we're commonly getting 30s and 40s to all of a sudden it's 80. And an athlete goes for a run at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which normally would be fine back in the winter, but all of a sudden it's like super high heart rate, didn't hydrate well enough, just it turns into, quite honestly, a shit show. And in this one case, an athlete ended up walking back because they were so out of sorts from their long run, which, given the heat and given I think they had a little stomach bug as well. That was definitely the right call for this athlete. But yeah, so I thought it might be a good topic to cover. What is self-sabotage? And we all do it, right? I've certainly done it myself. Probably still do it to a certain extent today. To be honest, one of the biggest self-sabotaging activities or actions or lack of action in this case is procrastination, you know?
Mm.
And got some things going on that I'm like, I really should do that. I got to get this done. And I do the other things that are easier, lower fruit hanging, to then tackling the big thing that I need to, get started on, which for me right now is this next big proposal that I'm working on, which I'm just not, the motivation's just not quite there. But at the same time, I'm also recognizing it's also probably a little bit of self-sabotage. So yeah.
Have you ever really looked into like what procrastination is or why we do that?
A little bit. I mean, from some of the psychology that I've read up on, I mean, it's very commonly from perfectionists, like not wanting, not being ready, not having the perfect amount of time set aside, not having your processes in place, maybe, for me, to be honest, I like to have my space organized and, if the house is a mess, I mean, sometimes I've even not been able to work on proposals because my house is a mess. I'm like, what does that have to do with writing a proposal? Nothing, but
I
I
think
feel
that's
more
got to be like
organized.
that's got to be the most common thing ever because like I'm the same like when the house is a mess I'm like no my house has to be in order first and then I can go
Then
and
I can
be
go forward.
organized in my work. 'Cause, like if my external environment is in chaos, my internal environment is in chaos, and so then like I can't focus to do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
The research I did on procrastination, it was really interesting. Well, and so this would be the thing. There are very few things that I procrastinate on, which I think I'm a rare bird, like in that way. Like I'm
Hmm.
able to make myself do the thing kind of no matter what. But I know that a lot of people aren't. And so, and this is not me saying like, oh, look at me, I'm perfect. It's more like that. Just I express myself. My faults come in other areas, but I've tried to help people through. When people will come to me and tell me that procrastination like is their like big issue. And so I did a bunch of reading on it, like a bunch of learning, trying to understand, what this is. And I can do it from a reasonably objective standpoint because it's not like I don't have emotional investment in there. And
Hmm.
this I found interesting. So I'd be curious what your response is. It was described to me as a stress response, right? Where like you're putting off the thing. And so there would be a couple reasons to do it, that you're putting it off because the task that you know you should be doing feels so overwhelming that you're
Yeah.
like afraid to start. And so the stress response is like a freeze response, or
I
like
could
you're
see
making
that.
yourself smaller, and like you're saying
Yeah.
I'm not even going to approach that because at this point the task is so big that it's overwhelming me, and so I'm sort of like frozen in this spot. And so I found that interesting. And then I just totally lost my train of thought. It was like, what was the
Well,
other reason why people do
I
it?
could definitely see that. I mean, I would say overall, I've not been a procrastinator in my overall in my life. I think I was always pretty good at delving out the work effort whenever it was I was, like for example, working out, like getting my training sessions in, like I that was never I don't really I can't identify so much with some athletes that really do procrastinate workouts to the point where it's not ideal for them to be doing that. Like it's too hot, they
Hmm.
didn't hydrate, they didn't fuel well, they put it, a lot of people put it off, they don't want to do the workout, but then they're too tired at the end of the day. That was never me. It was like getting the workouts in was fine, get it done in the morning. Sometimes I would skip workouts in the afternoon because I was pretty mentally taxed at the end of the day. But I can definitely identify with the project being so overwhelming and so big, in like some of the big things like dissertation. Maybe I didn't really just, I don't think I procrastinated my dissertation because I really wanted to get that thing done. But proposals, and I really want to get funding. So I don't, but yeah, I can definitely identify with the overwhelming task of starting something and the way I operate, which is something that I want to work on. I feel like at this point in my career, I should be better at it, which is that when I go in on something, I'm like all in and it completely consumes everything else. And so I know once I turn it on, like once I turn on the effort to do the proposal, like I'm probably not going to answer emails. I'm going to be less attentive to my dogs, maybe, right? Like I don't compartmentalize real well when the task and the importance of the task is very high. And that's where proposals kind of fall into um, into that category for me. So I could definitely see how that could be a little bit of a stress response as well. Like I know it's coming, and I'm kind of like, oh, I just want to put it off a little bit longer. Well, and then
Yeah.
to be fair, there's also I work very well under deadlines and pressure, and I don't know what
Oh,
how that
that.
fits in.
Yeah,
Okay,
that was
tell
going
me
to,
what
that
what.
was the second part. Remember when I said, and then I had a brain fart? Like, so that was
Yeah,
the
tell
second
me.
piece was that there are some people, and I mean, take this with a grain of salt, right? Like, look, I'm not a psychologist, but it's like some people are, um, we'll call it like addicted to adrenaline, right? We're like, so when you put something off until the last minute, and now you're like, it is going to take me an hour and a half to do that thing, and I have an hour and 25 minutes, right? And it's like, here's the deadline, and it's due, and I got to get there, or whatever. That there's an adrenaline rush that comes over you that allows you to focus really sharply and allows
Hmm.
you to get it done in a way that, like, if you had 3 hours to do the task, it was going to take an hour and a half, then it's kind of like there's like you don't have the actual like chemicals rushing through your body that allow
Hmm.
the level of focus that you
Hmm.
enjoy, right? Like, so you like that adrenaline rush and the drive to like hurry up and get it done, right? And like
Yeah.
there's a good feeling in that, and like genuinely like an ability to focus knowing that like I cannot screw around, I have to get this done immediately. And so so people will justify their procrastination in that, like, but I always get it done and I always get it done well. And the potential negative downside to that, if that is your like daily habit or pattern, right, and you live like that a lot, then like what happens is over time you're living in a state where like you're a
Oh
stress
yeah.
junkie, right? Like you're just fueled by adrenaline, and so you need to have that type of adrenaline in order to, that's what gives you energy to go do the thing. And apparently this
Hmm.
is a case for a lot of people who are chronically late, people who are like always 5 minutes late to
Oh,
everything. So like those people tend to, when they know that they need to like hurry up and get there or whatever, then it's like maybe in some cases they do that on purpose because they enjoy the feeling of the adrenaline rush that is like spurring them into action, and it's hard for them to make themselves act without the adrenaline like
yeah.
fueling that, if that makes
That's
sense.
yeah, it does. I will not put myself in that. I'm a
I
serial
hate that. I
early.
mean, I like Jen, for me, I'm like I've lived with high adrenaline for like once I learned that, I'm like, that's why I hate being late, because like I think that I have been like my whole body been oversaturated with adrenaline for
Mhm.
decades, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm healthier when I can lower those levels.
Right.
And so like and especially, so the example, if we want to get specific about this, because stories are like way more fun than just talking in abstract concepts, but like Like most of the time when I'm going on a bike ride, I ride to the ride, right? Like, I mean, I live within a half an hour of pretty much, most rides. If I'm going to meet people, it's less than a half an hour to ride my bike there. But I will always give myself at least 40 minutes, right? To just, and that way it's like, you know what? If I got stopped at the red light and took an extra minute or two, it's fine. I don't have to rush. I can like let my heart rate be really low. I can like ride over at a true warm up pace for myself instead of like a hurry up. I need to get, like I got to get there, on time because I hate being late. And so, yeah, I always leave myself an extra 10 minutes at least to get there so that I can just like relax and warm up into the ride. And that way I can be very specific about choosing when I'm going to work instead of having to like flood my system with adrenaline, working hard with, whether my heart rate's 155 the whole way over to the ride, and now I'm going to ride for 2.5 hours with these groups and like think I'm going to try to like push the hills. Like, no. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm huge on that like, and then I do the same thing riding home. Like that's my cool down. And sometimes it's funny because people will be like, "Oh, I'll ride home with you," and I'm like, "Oh God!" Like, I mean, sometimes it's fine, but like usually I'm like, "Okay, well, if you push the pace at all, like I'm just gonna let you go because like this is my cool down." Because again, it's like
Absolutely.
what I'm trying to do is like reduce the adrenaline and like all the stress hormones that
Hmm.
came along with like you're in survival mode, period, on a group ride. Like I mean, even if it's just if it's I'm working hard and trying to keep up, or I'm trying to not crash, like I'm trying to stay upright on my bike, or I'm trying to anticipate what's
Hmm.
everybody doing around me. I mean, those are really high
Hmm.
focus, high adrenaline situations. And so to give yourself the time and space to relax into that and then relax out of it is just genuinely healthier for your whole system. And so, yeah, I think in those terms. So, yeah, I don't let anybody drag me home at a fast effort after a
Good.
group
Yeah.
ride.
I actually, well, so last week I was on a review panel and it was pretty long days and a lot of very technical details, right? It was very technical. They always are, but this one, there we had a lot of proposals to get through. And the short of this is I had booked a call, or my athlete booked a call with me one of the afternoons, and it was later in the week. I was thinking we'll be done, no problem, or I'll be in editing mode, Well, I was late to the meeting by about 5, 10 minutes. And for some reason, my notifications got turned off from you have a meeting coming up. So I always get the 5 minute warning, and my calendar must have been off, and so I looked at the clock and I was like, oh my God, I think I have a meeting. I felt so bad. And he said, oh, it's a 10 minute rule. If you're, I was going to text you if you're more, I was about 10 minutes late. I'm always several minutes early, unless I'm running behind. And then I always text someone to say, look, I'm behind and I'll be on as soon as I can, blah, blah, blah. I just felt so bad, but I think I have there's family trauma around my mother being serially late. I don't think she's ever going to listen to this, so I don't care. I mean, yeah, I could tell you stories for days. My mom like leaving us at tennis practice for hours on end and forcing the coach to sit there with us, right? Because we're like 8, or the other moms not wanting her to be in the carpool because they know that she's not reliable. She's not reliable to pick us up. I think my little sister was in kindergarten and they couldn't find her. They couldn't back in the early 90s, probably before cell phones, but they got a hold of my dad who had to drive home. I don't know. It bad, right? So it's been drilled into me to be early because it's just a sign of, it's disrespectful in my opinion to be constantly late. I'm just not, there are occasions where we're late for very legitimate reasons, but that forgetting the meeting, and I just apologize. He didn't care, of course, but yeah. So also don't want to be stressed about it either, right? Like I don't want to be rushing from this to that to, yeah,
Yeah,
life
I
and
think
my
it,
job is stressful enough. And yeah.
I think that's like the big picture thing. And so if I'm looking at like in a big picture way, if my goal is to be as healthy as I can, then
Hmm.
it's like I'm like throughout each day I'm looking at where are my sources of stress coming from, right? Because they
Hmm.
come from lots of different areas, right? And it can be like I'm that project is stressful, like that interaction with that human I have to have
Interaction.
later is stressful, the workout I'm doing is stressful, if I didn't eat enough or on time, or like my feeling wasn't
Hmm.
right, like that can be an added stress, if I didn't get to bed on time or I didn't have enough sleep, like that. And so I'm looking at sort of like where are all the sources of stress
Hmm.
throughout the day, and when there's ones that I can control, right? Like being late is a giant stressor for me, and so I'm like, if that's within my control, if I allow it to happen, then yeah, I'm self sabotaging because I'm I'm taking on this like unnecessary stress burden that is making
Right.
it worse for me. And yeah, it just, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like I have enough, like you said, it's like we have enough sources of stress in our lives that we don't need to go out of our way to, it's like an unforced error. You're
Right.
like, why did I
Yeah.
do that? Like now it's going to be worse for me. So yeah, I think that
Yeah.
the procrastination for sure, lack of planning. I have an athlete that commonly writes in like when she misses a workout, and that like, and good for her that she takes responsibility for it.
Hmm.
Like she won't say like, there's some people who say, oh, the day was just too busy, right? And like, look, maybe like there are times, like, fine, right? But she sometimes will write in and say, I didn't plan well today, so I didn't get this in. And that you're like, you're exactly right.
Yep.
Like you didn't
That's
get it in because you didn't plan well. And so that's exactly right. So then, like, tomorrow, you can plan better, right? And so, like, I'm going to
hmm
do this or like stay on time or do the workout first, or, there are ways to plan your day.
yeah.
That's a totally different way of looking at it than, like, I mean, the day got away from me, right? Like, that's very different from I didn't plan well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the
Well,
same,
it's yeah.
but the day got away from me is like, I'm not taking personal responsibility then
Right.
for the way that
Right.
I manage my day versus I didn't plan my day well today. Like, that means that she's likely to plan her day better tomorrow because at least she knows that, like, I'm taking responsibility for that. And, like, good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. I
Versus
see.
when,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. What
I
were
was
you
going to say,
gonna?
versus when
Yeah.
it's
You
always
said
somebody
fresh.
else's fault.
Right.
Like, I didn't
Absolutely.
get this done because my coworker didn't did a thing, and or like my boss, or I mean, and look, sometimes those things are legit, but when they're happening, and I think this is how we know, like, is it a one off or is it self sabotage?
Hmm.
And these are, since our topic is self sabotage today, it's like, if that's a reason that you have to not get training in several times a week, like, take a hard look at that because it's probably self sabotage.
Yeah. I
Right,
agree.
versus
I
like if
agree.
it's once in a while, or and it's like this is a one-off, and it truly was like there was an emergency and your coworker didn't get in and you needed to take that shift, or you needed whatever, like, pick the thing, like there's things, then it's like that's not self-sabotage.
Hmm. No.
But there, some really honest self-reflection needs to happen in order to recognize that, like, actually, you know what,
Mhm.
I did that to myself. Like, I had a choice there. I could have done it differently, and I didn't. And taking responsibility for it is the only way to change the pattern going forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I see this almost in a similar way. I always ask the athletes I work with to put in on Monday, they have like commitment tabs. It's like that's where they can communicate, what they've got going on. If they've got longer time to train on Tuesday, maybe they've got 2 hours instead of an hour that they normally have, or they prefer where they want their swims, or if they've got group rides or whatever they want to communicate, so I can help build a schedule around their life. But not I have some athletes that will put more information in there than less. And I applaud that. I think that's taking, again, ownership and responsibility for trying to plan out your week and your training. And then I have other athletes I feel, no, I know that it's a constant optimistic view of the week, and like, oh, and they don't put a lot in the commitments, and inevitably it's, I mean, every week it's like, well, the day, yeah, similar day got away from me. It's almost never I didn't plan this. It's the day got away from me, pick the reason and don't get it in. As a coach, it's also challenging in that respect because, you want to have it, you want the training to be sustainable, slightly challenging and sustainable. But if the athlete doesn't have a good hold on their day to day, and some athletes do have a lot going on, a lot of complexity, but that's also, I mean, getting back to, like, some of that's a little bit choice. Now if you got young kids and they're sick and or you're taking care of parents, or a sick spouse, or whatever it may be, but we do have to take ownership for our jobs and how much we let them impact us. We've had this conversation on the podcast before, I think, around this aspect. But I also kind of view that as also self-sabotage, when you constantly take an optimistic view of what you can get in instead of a realistic view, and you really sit down with your planner and your calendar and your meetings, and then you hold time, right? Like, if say, my training time is 6 to 7 a.m. or 5 to 6 a.m., or it's, for some athletes it's maybe 3 to 4 in the afternoon, I don't know, and you just don't let clients book on top of it, whatever the situation may be, but trying to plan it, because planning should be flexible, but without a plan, it's just wishful thinking, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
unless you've got a real easy, a real easy, very carefree situation, which some people do, which is great.
Yeah.
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 What are the other?
Well,
I
another
Yeah.
one that I think for
Tell me.
sure, like
Yeah.
maybe we can ping pong back and forth. So, like, yeah,
Yeah.
not
Go.
planning, procrastination is a form of self sabotage. I find a ton of self sabotage around eating,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Food. So it's like, and it can go either way, right? Like either you're eating too much, or you're not eating enough, or you're eating at the wrong time, or whatever, and just like
Hmm.
not taking it into. So if we're bringing this back, because I mean, we can self sabotage around food in all the areas, but since this is like an endurance training podcast and we're coaches, like we can put our spotlight on how it affects training.
Hmm.
It's like either you're not fueling the training enough
Hmm.
consistently, or sometimes it happens too where it's like I went out to lunch and I ate this big meal, and I had a
Hmm.
beer with lunch or something like that. And then I came home and I tried to do this trainer workout and, I just was like
God.
really full and uncomfortable, or, what I mean? Like those
Yeah.
types of
Yeah.
things. And it's like, like that. And again, if it happens once in a while, it's not self sabotage,
Right.
right? Like it was just a dumb choice and it's fine and you take responsibility and you were uncomfortable and tomorrow will be fine. But if it's something that you're doing regularly, then it's like this is again same thing, like now it's something to like really take a look at and
Hmm.
like why are you doing that, like what is your
Yeah.
thinking behind it, like how what and to be really honest with yourself about like what am I thinking when I'm choosing. I have an athlete actually who's really really honest, which I appreciate so much. So she still continues to self-sabotage. It's a lot around eating, like she'll have a bad day or something frustrating, will happen that kind of set her off, triggered her somehow, and she will grab a candy bar or go eat ice cream or something, like as a way, because temporarily, right, like that makes you feel better
Hmm.
like in that moment, but
Right.
then later you feel horrible. And she knows this. I mean, she's been through it. She knows. And yet, right, it's still like really hard to
Hmm.
control at times. And so then, she'll miss her evening workout, and like, her job is early in the day, so the evening is the only time that she has to train. So like if
Hmm.
something triggered her during her day at work and she chooses to go to that gas station and buy the Snickers bar or buy the ice cream, then it's like the workout is not going to happen because
Hmm.
she's going to
Hmm.
feel
Hmm.
bad. Like, and that's what happened. She's like, I ate that
Hmm.
and then I just felt horrible and I laid down and went to sleep. But like, in goodness for her, she can admit that, right? And tell me, like, yep, that's what I did. And I'm like, that's good. What are you going to do tomorrow?
Hmm.
And like, because like,
Yeah.
because this is the other thing. If we're constantly beating ourselves up because we've screwed that up again, and then you're like, and now your story is like, well, and I'm a loser, and I'm right. Like, I mean, you can
Hmm.
spiral completely out of control there in a way that would be very hard to get back on track. Versus if you're like, okay, wait a minute, you know what? Because and actually, there was another athlete. It was like every Wednesday she like missed. Like I figured out this pattern, a new athlete, I'm like, Wednesdays, like she's just missing on Wednesdays, right? Like what's happening on Wednesdays? And so finally I just called her. I said, tell me about Wednesdays.
Hmm.
It's like the only day you're missing workout, like you can't do it. And like, because genuinely, honestly, it's like if there's a meeting after work or like there's something that's like you genuinely don't have time, then like that's on me to change your schedule,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But like if it was basically like it was some story that she had in her head that was like something she used to do with an ex of hers that they, she was like missing, and so there was just this feeling of lack. Every Wednesday it reminded her that she's not with this
Mm.
person anymore, and like, and there was a degree of sadness
Hmm.
and that she tried to cure with ice cream, and and it's like there, yeah, so that's a form of self-sabotage there. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
recognizing that, right? Like, so me calling her out on it was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, like that's what I'm doing to myself. And then from
Hmm.
there, like, okay, now
Yeah.
you have a choice, right? Because the choice is hers, it's not mine, right? Like,
Hmm.
I'm pointing a flashlight on it. Like, can you help yourself here?
Hmm.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's still hard.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
was
the
gonna
fueling thing
say
is a big one. So
the
yeah, you
fueling's
piped
huge.
in there.
Well, on that note, I mean, booze, right? Like that is,
Yeah.
I see absolutely. I mean, from fairly extreme, like completely missing the workout because they're hungover. That's less and less common as my athletes age. But back in the day, when I first started coaching, I would say, A fair amount. I don't know what that number is, and among even fairly competitive athletes, right? Like you just overdid it, and there was like kind of a transition point too, where like it kind of caught up, right, with folks. And I mean, I remember back when I still did drink, it got harder and harder. Late 30s, early 40s, like two glasses of wine, three glasses of wine used to be no big deal. I could get up and do 4 hours the next day up in the mountains running, no problem. And then somehow it was like, oh God, massive headache and didn't sleep well. And, so people have that realization at some point. Most people have that realization at some point and decide to maybe do something about it, or at least the frequency of overdoing it, goes down. But even for my athletes that have done the dry Januaries or done, cut out alcohol completely. I mean, I'll use one of my athletes as an example. He was, when he did dry January, he had green all month, best he's ever felt, huge gains in strength and bike fitness. And he was prepping it for a ski season. And yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you do need that. Like I can show a spotlight on this, and the research is very clear on alcohol and its harmful effects, not only on your endurance training, but probably on your health. And if you want to indulge occasionally, that's, do so, right? But then understand that it's I mean, I have to say it's almost like tobacco smoking at this point. I mean, maybe it's not quite that bad, but it's pretty not good. It's a carcinogenic substance, and I'm not going to go on that soapbox. But so we know the effects of alcohol. We especially know the effects on dehydration and not recovering as well, after your long rides, your long runs. So, anyways, the short of it is like he's went off, had a great ski season, definitely indulged, in the beers after skiing all day. I yes, like that is fun. It is part of life to enjoy that. But now getting back into training, he's like, he's like 2 beers and I feel like crap in the morning, and 2 beers and I just sluggish. And I'm like, what I'm going to say, like, choose what my recommendation for athletes that do choose to drink is, I know it's hard because a lot of times we're, Friday night, you want to go out with your friends, your happy hour. But Saturday's the big training day, or Sunday's the big training day, or both days, right? And Friday and Saturday tend to be the nights that most people want to indulge. Those are probably the worst nights to indulge, honestly. Like I would try to shift the alcohol indulgences to maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday, or Tuesday and Thursday, placing it where you don't have a big ride or a big run the next day. Or I always give options, right? Like it's a 2 to 1, 1 beer and 2 glasses of water, 1 glass of wine, 2 glasses of water, right? Like and if you have two, then that means four. Like you've got to try to mitigate the harmful effects that alcohol is having on your body. And so you can either do that by trying to place it different parts in your week. But I get it. I get the cultural routine of alcohol, which I think is, for a lot of people I work with, there's not an addiction there, but there are cravings for sure. There are cravings, and there in its habit and its routine to do this, and yet I think once they kind of step away and look at how much better they feel when they're not drinking, it's clear as night, and clear as day, clear as the Milky Way on a dark night. That's what I was going to say. We
Coming
just
from the
had a good
scientist.
new moon.
It's funny.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was going to be what I was going to add in on nutrition. And for those athletes that still do indulge in alcohol, to be really mindful about it. And we've talked about HRV, and like what it does to your HRV, and HRV is an indication of stress. Alcohol is a stress in your body. If you got, stressful training, and I get it, right? Like a lot of times when I would do my long rides, all I wanted was like, cold beer, a shower beer, right? So great. And
I
I
used
always
to do
followed it
that.
up
It's
with,
really interesting how things have changed. Like,
yeah,
so it was probably 15 years ago that it was like, you would go out and ride 70, 80, 90 miles and then come home, and like, boy, does a beer taste good at
oh
that
yeah,
point. Like it
oh
just
yeah,
is like a
totally.
cold beer, like, and it was just, I don't know, somehow I remember really liking to do that. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
do that really hardly at all anymore. I have two stories
yeah,
about the alcohol
yeah.
that came up when you were telling your story. So one, I don't know, this is a while back. Actually, it was 2013. I remember because so I had an athlete that had told me her goal was to qualify for Kona, and so I mean, I'm sure you do this too. Like I treat my athletes differently when they tell me about a big
Mm,
specific goal like that
mhm.
versus like my goal is to finish this triathlon, maybe go faster than I did last year, but I just want to feel good at the end
Have
and,
fun.
and not injure myself and whatever, right? Like, so there's a training plan for that. And then there's the training plan for the athlete, or more, it's like how I am with the athlete, the
Hmm.
feedback I give, or whatever. When the athlete says, I have a big goal, I want to qualify for the world championships. And so this athlete, there was this Saturday, and, before whatever qualifying race she was doing, there was a Saturday where, her bike ride was like, she's supposed to have a long ride, right? Like, and she cut it short. And she's like, oh, I just felt like shit. I went out drinking with my friends last night, and so her 6 hour ride turned into a 2 hour ride, and she
Hmm.
feels like shit. And she took responsibility. She's like, I went out last night,
Hmm.
I drank. Okay, cool. And like, I wrote her back this email, and to be fair, I don't totally remember the email, but she does. And so and she's brought it up and said that this for her was a turning point. And I didn't necessarily mean it to be a turning point. I was just, you know, doing my job, I thought. But I wrote her back and I said, like, FYI, the girls that are going to qualify for Kona last night, they didn't go out with their friends. They prepped their bottles.
Hmm.
That's what they did on Friday night. Like, they prepped their bottles. They had their bottles in the fridge. Like, they went to bed early so they could set their
Yep.
alarm and get up this morning. So they were heading out the door at 6 a.m. before it was going to get really hot. They're meeting their friends. They had like, they started planning for their training on Friday night. Now, does everybody need to do that? No. And I don't come down on everyone if they go out on Friday night instead of prioritize the ride on Saturday. But
Hmm.
this athlete had said, I want to qualify for Kona. Okay. Well, then you need to act differently. And I guess the way that I guess it was very straightforward. And because in her mind, she was like, you kicked my ass. And I was like, okay, I didn't, like, I wasn't trying to be like
Yeah.
that hardcore. But she said, that was the best thing you ever did for me. She said it was so straightforward and it was so like the girls equality. And she was like, okay, so if I want to be one of them, I have to do what they're doing. And that involves saying no to the Friday night thing for this period of my life because this goal is a higher priority than, my social life right
Hmm.
now. And I'm like, for those girls who qualify for Kona, like that is the case. So like, you
Hmm.
don't have to have that as your goal. But if it is, then here's the actions, that you take. Then my second story is for another gal who, and again, this is a while, 15 years ago, and she had a husband who liked to go out, on like so Saturday night. So like we would do like our long training on Saturdays, but then the long run was typically Sunday morning. And she's training for an Ironman, so she'd have 15 to 20 miles like every Sunday basically. And she did most of those runs like sort of hungover. It was so funny because, and a lot of times she wasn't telling me, she was just quietly just like doing the work, taking responsibility for like, yeah, I felt like shit because like I drank a bunch last night. But it was funny because she was telling me like her rationale afterwards. She was like, I just kind of feel like the hungover Sunday run is sort of perfect because she's like, you're doing this long run, and she goes, it's very specific. Where you feel like shit, you're dehydrated, she's like, you're making yourself run anyway. And she's like, so the Ironman marathon's like really not that hard when you do all of your Sunday runs hungover.
I mean,
So
I
like,
don't
as I
disagree with
say that,
her,
like, I know, it's like, and I'm not recommending that, like, and so by the way,
No.
like, she was like 32 when she was doing that, or she might have even
Right.
been
That's a
29,
big,
you know what I mean? Like, she was a lot younger than we were. And so, like, her body could handle it in a way that, like, older people couldn't. But it was so funny. It's like, look, I'm not recommending do all your Sunday long runs hungover, but it was funny, like, her justification and rationale. And to be fair, she did pretty well, like, in her Ironmans. Like, she could run, like, sort of 350 to 4 hours range, every time. And she's like,
yeah.
'cause I just was so used to feeling like shit on my long runs. So it's like, same, same.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I do agree. And I think there actually is, and I don't, it's really hard in your body to do those,
Yeah,
long
yeah.
runs,
Yeah, you're not
really
setting yourself
hungover.
up for success by doing that. That's more like mental
But
training. It's not good
yes,
physical training. It's more better
no,
like I'm teaching myself to suffer mentally, but it's not
right.
like good for you physically.
But at the same time, I will also say that, having done those myself, going out and doing a Sunday, long run hungover, I was like sweating out the alcohol, like,
Hmm.
I felt better afterwards if and I always took a lot of hydration on the run and fueling and tried to get myself right. But, and I mean, yeah, it was, work hard, play hard mindset. And I embrace that quite a bit. in my 20s and 30s, and then it started to get really hard.
Yeah.
And I was slowing down, and I'm like, why am I not, so okay. But to be fair, I mean, when I was in a very focused Ironman, not every Ironman block, but many, I didn't drink at all. Like at 3, 4 month block, no alcohol. And so, you know, and even with that, I never qualified for Kona. So I don't know if it was worth it or not, but it was a good investigation, I think. And when I got to a certain age, investing that for longer and investigating those periods longer and longer made me finally realize, like, I don't need this in my life anymore, and making
Yeah.
that decision. But yeah, so alcohol, it is a big one. It's a big one. And fueling, and I would say with the fueling, just to basically touch back on that, I mean, what I commonly see so often is under fueling the training, and then ravished and overeating at night, and overeating a lot of shit, a lot of crap that you don't need to eat. So poor body composition, poor recovery, poor sleep, probably poor blood glucose if you're wearing a GCM. So, I mean, I see, and hate to say it, but a lot of times it's athletes that are weight conscious, and this is what they do. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you, but like the fueling that you take in during your rides and runs is basically used for energy and just helping you improve your fitness. And then by doing that, you will feel less likely, you'll be less likely to overeat later and or make better choices later.
Yep.
Yeah,
I tell
that
athletes that
is.
exact same thing. I'm like, the most common error I see is underfueling the long ride on Saturday, getting
Hmm.
home, and with the intention of, well, I'm burning calories here and I need to, I want to drop a couple pounds. And so
Hmm.
I'll underfuel this training and that will help me drop a couple pounds. And they think they're being all good and disciplined. But what they're really doing is sabotaging that ride because the ride wasn't as high quality as it would have been had they fueled it as like
Hmm.
they should have. And then they get
Hmm.
home and they may even not even eat a ton immediately after because again they're still
Maybe
in their
not.
like disciplined mode. But come 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m., they're
Yeah,
like ravished, so hungry. And then what the brain does is like, oh, well, I can go have that pizza or that ice cream tonight. And like, and I
because
deserve it. I rode 80 miles this morning, right? Like, so like for sure should do this. And then they end up eating way overeating with a lack of discipline around what they're eating because they're starving and they've justified it now in their mind. And it's like when you look internally at like the stress hormones that are happening in your body, so it's like now that training event became even more stressful because you underfueled it.
Mm.
And then later you're starving and so you overeat stuff that isn't really that good for you. And then you're right. Like so then now your glucose levels are gonna go way up and then the next day you wake up and maybe you're like extra puffy and inflamed, right? Because
Hmm.
I remember like sometimes back before I knew any of this stuff, because by the way, I made all of these mistakes. The Saturday that I just described, I used to do it all the time unknowingly. I didn't know. Now I know better, so I do better. But I remember waking up on Sunday morning at times and like my eyes would be like so puffy that it's
Mm.
like I would have a hard time opening. I just felt like my whole body's super inflamed. And a lot of that was because of, this big exercise that I did Saturday morning that was under fueled. So that was a stress. And then later, like the crap that I would eat was stuff that
Mm.
actually wasn't super good for my body. And I would just wake up super inflamed. Like now, and so that you will gain weight. Like that is the recipe
Hmm.
for how to gain weight while you're
Yeah.
training for an
Yep.
Ironman. So like anyone who trains for
Absolutely.
an Ironman and puts on 10 pounds, I promise you, like that's
Yep.
what you're doing. So in order to do it differently, the idea would be almost literally eat like as much as you can before, during, and after the training. And then later
Hmm.
that night, you literally might be able to just get away with like a salad with some chicken on it. Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, and then you're
Yeah.
like, I'm not famished because like I didn't put myself in a deep
Yeah.
hole doing that long ride. So like I can just eat like a
Yeah.
normal person after as long as you feel it enough during. So yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I preach that all the time.
Yeah, I do. I do as well. I do as well. And again, lucky. I was lucky in that my mentors early on, I mean, I've always eaten kind of like a trash can. Like I can eat a lot, and I can digest it pretty well at a lot of intensities and on the bike. So I do probably have some genetic ability to do that, but I also just I learned early on that like you got to fuel the efforts. And so yeah, I know. I don't think I ever had until later in life, right? Like early 40s, I started to have some of the swelling, but it wasn't actually training related. I think it was probably just hormone related, or for I'm not even really sure if the doctors even know, right? But it's not my diet. I think it was salt sensitivity, probably from various hormonal fluctuations. And that's when I started to actually pull back a lot of the hydration, because a lot of the trainer rides I do have. We talked about sweat rate a little bit. My sweat rates, I have high sweat rate, but concentration is pretty medium. So I'm not actually losing that much. So I don't probably need to take in as much, for short hour and a half, 2 hours, and so I've moved to mostly just water on the trainer, and it seems to help quite a bit. So that's good. That's an aside. I don't know where I was going with that. So what other like
But
self-sabotage? I have a, go ahead. You're going to say
yeah, so
something.
like let's shift to talk. So what we just talked about was a lot of self sabotage around sort of like life and training. There
Hmm.
are ways athletes self sabotage before or during a race as
I was
well,
going to, yep, exactly.
right? So
That's where I
like
wanted to go.
before the
Yeah.
race, and and
God.
I, yeah, right. We probably have lots of stories about this. My biggest pet peeve. It's those athletes who would be like, "Oh, I didn't train for this at all," or "Oh, I haven't ridden my bike in
Yep.
4 months, and I'm just going to jump in." And like the amount of people that I mean, I personally know athletes that have gone and won races, right? Like you won your first overall. They're local races, but still, like you won the race, and before the race, you're self sabotaging, telling everybody that you haven't ridden your bike. I haven't ridden my bike at all. And then you go post the fastest bike split and win the race. And you're like, do you know, like you just made everybody else feel like so shitty. You know what I mean? Like
Kidding.
I just felt like that was like really disrespectful. So like, if that's the case that you didn't ride your bike and you still won the race, like maybe just like don't say that to people because it's so disrespectful. But I see what they're
Mhm.
doing because what it is, it's like they know that like I'm actually have the capacity to be a really good athlete. I didn't prepare
Yes.
properly for this race, and so I need to put my excuses out there ahead of time so that when I don't perform, or if I don't perform up to my own standards or the standards that I think somebody else expects of me, here's my excuse served up on a silver platter before I even, before the gun even goes off. And then at the end, when it turns out that they actually did great, it's like, well, yeah, I don't know, I just got lucky. And you're like, okay, well, like that was shitty.
Honesty. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, it does. It's very disrespectful to the community and your other competitors to do that. Why, right? Why do people do that
Yeah.
though? Like there is a fear, well, almost always it's a fear of failure. So you
Hmm.
admit that you did the training, or by admitting that you did everything you could and you still don't meet the mark, whatever the mark might be for you. That can be very uncomfortable. And a lot of us have that. Like you do your absolute best to prepare, and it might not be enough. That's reality.
Hmm.
There's also that, like, well, I guess this is getting a little bit more into the mindset or the race mindset of like there's a fear of success, like saying that I prepared really well and preparing really well and planning, right? And like, what does that mean if you meet whatever it is you want? Does that mean, I mean, some people just have an aversion to like success, I guess. I don't know. I don't identify
I
with
know.
this
Did you ever
quite.
have that? Because like I'm like I
No.
never understood that fear of success. Like I always had like I had I mean, I can look back and just be honest about it now. Like I was desperate for success when I was racing, and when people would talk about this fear of success, I'm like, I don't understand that. Like I'm not afraid
I
of succeeding. Like I
Yeah.
absolutely want to win. But what I will say is that I've coached athletes that have been among the best in their area, right? Where like
Hmm.
they win at least on the local level. They go to the race and they win, and they do that sort of year after year, pretty consistently.
Hmm.
And then there's a fear. I still wouldn't call it fear of success, but it's like the anxiety that comes along with like success when you've been winning. Success
Yes.
means winning. And like we don't actually have
Yeah.
control over winning. Like somebody new moved into your area and she's really fast, right? Or, or
Hmm.
she's improving and like she beats you. And so second place for you feels like a failure, right?
Hmm.
Because like you're so used to winning. And so like that can be there there may be some self-sabotage going on there because you need an excuse of like why you didn't
Hmm.
win when like you thought you
Hmm.
should have won because you have won in the
Right.
past. And I think that the burden and there's some documentaries and stuff that talk about this too because pick a sport, this is the
Right.
way
And it
where it's
exists.
like
Yeah.
once you win, like the first win is really cool and it's fun and it's empowering and it's exciting and
Yeah.
it's all the things, but then the next year the pressure to do that can be
Hmm.
immense, right? Like the
Yeah.
pressure to back it
Yeah.
up and repeat that, like that's actually
Yeah.
the hardest thing, is to come back and do it again.
Yeah.
The pressure. And so the idea of like keeping your head on straight and doing all the things to set yourself up for success and then not sabotage it right before you go out again because of fear. Like, yeah, I don't know. I never understood that fear. Like, where's the problem with this, with win, like with your winning, with your success?
I
I
agree.
don't know what that is.
I mean, yeah, I've read about it, right? That this does exist. I think that
Okay, listen,
what
if
you're,
anybody
yeah,
knows about fear of success,
yes,
like if you've had fear of
yes,
success and you can educate us, we are all ears. Like, I want to hear
right,
your story. Please call me and tell me all
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I definitely want to win proposals. I definitely wanted to be on the. I wanted
Yeah.
to. Yeah, I was. There was no. I wanted to be the best.
Me too.
That's
I'm
fine.
not
Yeah,
afraid of winning. I'm always trying to win.
yeah. Now, I will say there's. I do have a little bit of an aversion to being recognized. I don't like that.
Mm.
So feeling like an embarrassment around recognition, but that doesn't come into play until later, right? Like if you have to go to the podium or if you have to like go to awards ceremony, or I never liked any of that. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't know why, but I think the fear of failure drove me in a lot of ways versus like the fear of success. Like the well, in some ways, it's like I think I could identify with some people that um, want to have an excuse, right? Why they didn't perform to their own expectations or someone else's or whatever. For me, it was always my own expectations, and so I can see in certain Ironman builds that I allowed, and I mean it's always complicated. It's not a simple story. It wasn't like I was just choosing not to train, but I also have to take ownership that I allowed my work to infiltrate. I allowed coaching at sometimes to infiltrate. And what I mean by that, it's like I'm not blaming it, but there's only so many hours in the day and I made choices. And sometimes I do wonder if I made those choices out of like, well, I knowing I had to be big volume to make the progress and I didn't have it, right? So I didn't have the time. Now I never didn't show up for a session and give my all, but did I skip sessions? Oh my God, yeah. Right. Like I didn't, and I always took ownership, didn't plan well, didn't allocate the time that I needed to do this double swim or whatever it would have been. I think I could see myself, just looking back for certain Ironman builds, I definitely could have had that like infiltrating into my psyche of, what I needed. It's sort of perfectionism too, in a way. Like if I couldn't get perfect, if I couldn't get the 20-hour week or the 25-hour week, then 15 wasn't good enough. So I should just skip it and make it like 5. Right? 5 hours. And so I joke that I'd off the couch Ironmans, and I, in some ways, it's like, yeah, my training was pretty bad, and I somehow managed to still have respectable for me times. But could I have done better? Yes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of people self-sabotage in the race
Hmm.
by telling the story. They tell themselves a story. Well, I always walk an Ironman, or I can't run, I'm slow, or I'm not gonna finish, or I never podium, or I whatever, name your thing, right? And so then they default to doing the thing. I mean, I see this a lot in Ironman in the walking. Well, I always walk. When it's time to walk, I guess I just walk, and that's just who I am, without really like looking into the reasons why. Now there might be nutrition issues, there might be other issues, there might be they overbiked, they didn't have the fitness, whatever it might be. But I think the stories that people tell themselves about their capabilities sets them up. Some people sets them up for some self-sabotaging in the race, and that could also look like nutrition fuck ups, excuse my language. It could look like poor pacing, it could look like not having a plan, right, and going by feel. And
I think that not having a plan is a real thing. Like, because it is interesting how, like, there's some athletes who are really into it. Like, I've got my plan. And then there's others who, even when I've suggested that they, write this down, write it out, like, write it out a week ahead of time so that
Mhm.
you can marinate in it, you can adjust it if necessary, you can tweak it. Now you have your list of all the things that makes it easier to pack. Like, it's a way to be organized and planning and reduce stress. That's how I see it. And it was really interesting, like where I've had athletes that have been like they're so stressed out about their first Ironman, and their solution, I shit you not, is to not write a plan because
And
writing the
not think
plan would
about
be
it.
too stressful, Michelle.
That's
And
fine.
I'm like,
Yeah.
if you think that actually sitting down and writing a plan is too stressful, like, good luck on the day. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, so you think
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to go wing it and that that's going to make it go better? You know, like that's not how
Mm-hmm.
this works. But it is,
Yeah.
that is a stress response, like for sure, of being like, I'm too afraid of this event to even think about how I'm going to execute myself, execute it on the day. That's for sure a stress response
Mm-hmm.
in that
Yeah.
way. I never understood
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
feel you. I remember. I think I even wrote a blog back in the blogging days. I definitely wrote a blog going into a race, and I don't remember which race it was now. But the concept of it remains. Of I felt like my training was pretty much perfect, and I addressed the fact of like how nervous I was going into the race because it was like my training was perfect. Like I absolutely nailed my training. I did all the sessions. I slept well. I ate well. I mean, I did all the things I thought I knew. I mean, I think at this point I could actually do it better, but like in the moment, I
At the
thought I
time.
did
Yep.
everything like to the best of my ability. And then it was like, it's so scary when you do that because what if you still
Mm-hmm.
don't achieve what you think you can achieve when everything was perfect? Like the only, you don't have an excuse, and so the only answer is I'm not good enough, right? Which is like, oh my god, that's like the heartbreak. I mean, that's where the like stick the knife in and twist it is like, no matter what I do, I'm not good enough. And that, first of all, that sentiment comes from childhood. I have addressed a lot of that very directly and head on. But yeah, I mean, it's just really fascinating to be like, I'm afraid of putting myself out there and knowing that like I crossed all my T's and I dotted all my I's because now if I still don't do it, I don't have an excuse. The only answer there is I'm not good enough. And like that, depending on how you're judging yourself or what it means to you, right? Like what your results mean to you, that can be a real problem. And so it is a matter. I mean, so then if we talk about like, oh, then what's the solution there? Is like removing your self worth, like removing the coupling of your self worth with your race results. So, like, what does that race result mean about you? It's like, if it has to do with like how good you are as a person, how valuable you are as a person, how valuable you are as a coach, like that's a real problem.
Yeah. No, I fully, yeah, I agree. And I think interestingly, right? Like a lot of you talk about the pre-race jitters, right? Like the pre-race anxiety when you have a really good build. And what does that mean? And getting into that. But then a lot of athletes, I think, will take so the pre-race. I just want to touch on the pre-race jitters, the pre-race anxiety that we all have, which that's normal. And I also see so many athletes who have had really good builds. Okay, maybe not perfect, right? But really good builds. And they still default to it wasn't enough. And I didn't do enough. And they start questioning everything. Everything from preparation to, I mean, whatever, name it, because they're so anxious. And so then they bring that their race and end up underperforming in a lot of ways, exclusively due to that. But I think it played a big role in that, I wasn't able to guide or help them process. I'm sorry. We've got something going on outside and I don't know what it is. I think it might rain. And
There's
so, oh, it is
wildlife.
raining.
Did they bark at the rain? Do your dogs bark at the rain?
No, no. Well, no, my older dogs would get scared of the thunder, but I
Mm.
think it's getting windy, and so I think there's maybe some wind knocking some stuff around. But
Like I hear a
anyways,
noise.
I hear a noise. But yeah, there might be some deers out there or some bunny rabbits. Yeah, self-stop. I mean, so planning in races very important. Going back, touching on again your thoughts about when you had a good build and near perfect, right? And what does that mean if you don't meet the mark? That I think touches on the self-reflection that we all need, right? In when we think things, either it's been pointed out to us that this might be going on, or we recognize it, right? We kind of shine that light on the consciousness of the decisions we're making, and are these decisions in line with our long-term goals? And if they're not, like that self-reflection and that questioning of like, okay, well, why are we doing the behavior then, right? Why are we, whatever it is it might be, whether it's eating the candy bar or it's not prepping, not right now. I have to go back to the heat, right? Because I have athletes that are just they're literally self-sabotage. They're sabotaging their long runs because they're choosing to run when it's 80, 85, 90 degrees outside instead of in the morning when it's cool. And I'm like, go to bed earlier, get up earlier, you know, I don't, and then take a nap later in the day when it's hot, right? Sorry, this is my big boy Braggy. He wants to be on camera apparently.
Well, hi,
You can
Braggy.
see my messy Braggy Breeze. Do you want
Hi,
to say hi?
Braggy. There's the other one too.
Yeah, there's the, yep, yep. Oh, we got them both.
Boy, they're like, love it.
Sorry. So it's identifying, trying to identify, and sometimes it takes some deep work, right? To identify
Hmm.
why are we doing the thing, you know? And usually it's stemming from, like in my, you know, it could be stemming from deeper stuff, you know, whether that's like upbringing, family history, whether it's, you know, is it, you know, is it the thoughts we're having? Is it getting into negativity? So the thoughts drive the emotions, then, you know, the emotions affect our actions usually. So that's why, you know, a lot of people have the action influences your mood, right? I mean, it does if we can take the right action. And what is the right action? The right action is being in it's taking the step towards your goals or your values instead of away from your goals or
Hmm.
values or whatever it is you're wanting to do. But a
Hmm.
lot of people, it's hard to get there. It's hard to understand like the why of like why am I overeating, why am I craving, what's you know, for me, I do when I'm stressed out too, when I'm in proposal writing, I'm like pretty heavy on the like comfort foods. I'll crave things that I don't ever crave, right? Like the macaroni and cheese, homemade macaroni and cheese, and you know, chocolate, and you know, the snacky things, trail mix. I mean, trail mix cannot be in my house because I will eat all of it very quickly. And why do I do that? It's a stress response, you know, it's comfort. So
Yeah. Well, and I
yeah.
think there can be too, like, and again, depending on like, how you grew up and like sort of what internal issues, because I mean, I don't know if we all have internal issues, but I suspect that like a lot of us do, like a vast majority anyway would have some
Hmm.
sort of issue. And, like maybe there was somebody in your past that told you you would never be good enough at the thing, right? Like whatever the thing is, it could be a teacher, a parent, an uncle, a neighbor, whoever. And like if you internalize that, people will then have different responses where, some will be like, well, I'll prove you wrong. And then they put the blinders on and they go like find success in the thing, and then
Hmm.
ultimately at the end they realized that actually my answer wasn't in the success, like my happiness and my self-worth wasn't actually attached to that win, because I can win and I still don't feel good enough about myself. But then there's the other side that is like somebody told you, or for whatever reason you have a belief that like you're not good enough to do the thing, you'll
Hmm.
never be good enough to do the thing. And as you start approaching being good enough to actually do the thing, that's when you're like, well, wait a minute, no, my reality is I shouldn't be able to do this thing. And so like that's where I'll overeat, I'll undereat, I won't plan for the race, I'll put the training off, I'll like just do something to screw it up. And that
Hmm.
way you have an excuse to fulfill the
Hmm.
prophecy, which is I'm not good enough. Yeah,
I'm
I knew
enough.
I
Yeah.
wasn't good enough. I knew I wouldn't be able to do that. And it's really like not even the thing, like it's not even the training, like it's the underlying condition of believing. Like, what
Hmm.
do you believe about yourself? Like, do you believe that you deserve to have that success?
Hmm.
Right? So like if you don't believe that you deserve to have success, you don't believe that you deserve happiness, like you're going to find a way to not be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
not hard to do,
Yes.
because there's lots of ways to like that, that comes about. It like ultimately it's gonna like everything kind of goes back to how do I feel about myself, what am I doing this for, what am I trying to achieve. And I think that ultimately, and we've talked about this before too, what it comes down to is when I love the way it feels to do the thing. I love the way swimming feels. I love the way it feels when I'm fit
Hmm.
enough on the bike to like, push and work up that hill. And I know when my threshold is high enough and my fitness is deep enough, there's like that effort that's like hard, but you can hold it. You're like, I'm not going
Hmm.
to blow up here. Like I can totally do this. Like that's such a good feeling to me. And like it's in my mind, it's like that's a feeling that can only be earned. Like you can't fake that. Maybe some people are just genetically gifted more than others, and like that's a real thing. But for me personally, it's like I know that I have to earn that through a lot of training. And it just feels good to like have access to it. Like I like that. And then however it turns out on race day, if there even is a race day, like that's cool. But it took me decades to get there. right? Like
Mhm.
that's not where
Yeah.
I started. Maybe some people, maybe this new generation. Do you think the younger generation will be healthier than us as far as their like attitude and
Mm.
approach toward self-sabotage or no? I really don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think well, if the powers that be, if the current regime has their way, in terms of taking women out of the workforce, out of the voting, out of the, they would like more
We'll have
women at
lots of
home,
time to
and
train. We won't be working.
that, yeah, it's true. We
You
might
think they'll still let
not
us
have any.
race? Will we be
Yeah,
allowed?
probably not. Well, and if we don't have any birth control, then we might have like 10 kids like they would prefer. So there might be some gender divides here going on as we move forward, which
Yeah,
I thought they were
fair.
closing. I thought, I mean, we grew up, right? Like I mean, we both, well, I don't know. I don't want to speak for how, I think for the most part, women of our generation felt like they had many doors open. Not maybe everything, right? Like there definitely was still some systemic gender sexism, whatever, right? Like I could recognize that in my graduate career with some older professors. For example, a female classmate gives an answer and, oh, it's not quite right, Jane. And then Joey gives the exact same answer, phrased differently. Oh, you're so brilliant. That happened a lot. But anyways, I digress. I don't know if they're going to be healthier. I hope they are, but yeah, I don't know. I think
So
everything's
the way
pretty
to be
uncertain.
healthier, I mean, that feels like a nice segment because you say, okay,
Yeah.
so like, how do we, as with everything, solving any problem starts with an awareness that this is a
Hmm.
problem, right? And so the self reflection and radical honesty that needs to happen here, like if you're listening to this and you feel like, yeah, you know what, I see myself in what they're talking about, I have a tendency to self sabotage, like the it starts with awareness. So like I'm aware that this is something that I do when I'm super
Hmm.
stressed out or when I'm, like not feeling good about myself, I go get ice cream. Okay, like that's a pattern. And I can look back and see all the times that I've done that to myself as a pattern. And so therefore, it's like I think that that pattern is probably really hard to break until you shift the internal narrative that you're telling yourself about yourself, right? So like the mindset is a story we tell ourselves about ourselves. So like if I'm telling myself that I'm not good enough, I'm never going to be good enough, I don't actually deserve any success, and who knows where that came from, right? It came from somewhere and it's wired in there. And so therefore I'm going to enact these behaviors that ensure that indeed I'm never going to find the success, right? Then it's like I guess there's potentially it goes both ways where you're like, because I get it. Like the Brad Stulbergs of the world will say it starts with action, just start doing the action. But sometimes that action is just so hard to do if you haven't resolved the underlying psychology of I don't deserve this, right? I'm not good
Right.
enough. I'll never be good enough. So if you can then go back, the way that I've done this, the way that it worked for me was to go back and genuinely look closely at the successes that I had, right? No, and big or small, it doesn't even matter, but like find the successes that you've had and then recognize yourself for those successes. And so
Hmm.
you're like, okay, like I did that well, and I'm going to give myself a pat on the back, or I'm going to say that was good. And then when you can start doing that, what happens is your internal narrative about yourself starts
Hmm.
shifting. And so now you're like, you know what? Wait a minute. Like I did do that, or I have been consistent. Like I said, I was going to swim 5 times this week, and I swam all 5 times. Right? Even if some of them were short or whatever, fine. Like you did the thing you said you were going to do, then it's like, okay, wait a minute, I am doing this. What does that mean about you? I'm consistent. And you start shifting this narrative. So and if you do that enough, you practice. So that is a practice. So it starts with awareness, and then it comes into practice. How I'm going to practice recognizing myself for small wins along the way. And then over time, you can start shifting that narrative about yourself and to be like, okay, like I do deserve this, or like I have earned that. I do believe I
Hmm.
can do this thing. And from there, then maybe you start making better choices of like, I'm going to actually eat at the right time. I'm going to wear the right thing that isn't going to rub me the wrong way. I'm not going to wear the shoes that are going to give me blisters. And that would give, like, that's a really good excuse, right? I didn't put socks on. So I had these terrible blisters and look at my bloody feet. And this is how hard I tried. But like, I had to walk because my feet hurt so much.
Hmm.
It's like, well, you could have put socks on, right? And like, that would have alleviated that problem. So like all
Right.
those, like look for those little things that you're doing but then look to see like what's underneath that. Like what's really the problem there. And
Yeah.
if it comes down to the feeling of like I don't
Mhm.
deserve this success, then like sit with that for a minute and like where did you learn that and is it true?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think that, is overarching number one, right? Like you have to have to have the self-awareness and understanding. And then if you're finding that this self-dialogue is predominantly pretty negative, like trying to change that. Uh, and I think recognizing while you're doing this, while you're investigating this, like investigating your habits as well. And
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that, right, like sometimes those actions are very large to take, right? Like just do the action and then you'll feel better. It's like, well, but if the action's so huge, right, maybe there's small incremental steps to changing it. I would say, what I recommend for my athletes that do, like, let's just use the example of alcohol again, like to try to cut down or change that to change their habits, which I don't believe are in the category of a problem from like a alcoholism standpoint, but they do find it in their routine. And so it's like, don't leave the routine. So routines are what they are because of these small actions that we don't even think about. And some routines, we,
Mm-hmm.
literally like brushing our teeth, right? Or hopefully everyone brushes their teeth, but they're just they're so natural and ingrained that to change them often takes a lot of energy and a lot of thought. And so, how do we do that? And it's like we can set in place alternatives, for example, drinking, right? It's like, so for in the alternative of beer, the non-alcoholic beer. And of course, my athlete I've seen he's also keeping track of what he's eating in his in training peaks, and he's having some athletic brewing,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, instead. So great. Like on the weekdays, going to have that instead of beer, and he's feeling a lot better in the morning, probably, a little less dehydrated. So, but you have to plan for that, right? Like you have to, because if you don't have a plan for what you're going to do, you'll probably default to doing the thing you always do. And so I think there's like having the reflection, trying to change the narrative around some of these things that you might be recognizing as self-sabotaging, then also trying to change the habits so that the new habits also become as natural as the old habits in terms of like eating or drinking or what time you work out or your plan for the week or whatever it might be that you're trying to change the habit on, not procrastinating on your proposals in my case. So yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit like two pronged. I always take the like, what are the actionable steps that I can do here? Which is not always the right answer. Sometimes the right answer is to actually just sit with it and to try to understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's, another not a, sometimes needing to take action is also another sign of some, what I'm looking for, like a need of self-reflection for better or worse, right? Like, why do I always like sitting and allowing things is often not my comfortable place, even though I meditate regularly in terms of wanting to change. Once you identify something's not working for you, I want to figure out what's the way to make it work and how do I do that? And so I think that's where the
Or
action
like
comes
a
in.
really good question to ask yourself, and you could even do this just first thing in the morning, right? Like so you're either your alarm goes off or you woke up naturally without an alarm and you're laying there like even before you get out of bed. Like a lot of times I'm reminding myself like what day is it? Like it's Tuesday. Okay, what do I have going on today? And then the idea being the internal question you're asking yourself before you even get out of bed is like how can I set myself up for success today? Right? And even if it's just I'm going to pick one micro action, right? Like it's just a
Hmm.
small thing to do and then I'm going to follow through on that thing. And when I do that, then like recognize yourself for that, right? Like, you know what? I said that this is what I was going to do, and then I did that. So good job. And then I saw how it worked out for me.
Hmm.
And you know what? That was better. So that's cool. Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do that again. And like keep doing that until like that's a pattern. But really asking yourself, how can I set myself up for success today? And it's just based on like whatever you have going on that day and then knowing yourself. And I think that the radical honesty part is really hard for a lot of people because like we want like we I say we I say we, but it was like, well, this was the old me. Now I'm like, I'm fully capable of taking responsibility for my actions. Like, but like that part, I feel like that's really important too. You're like, yeah, you know what? I chose to drink last night and I feel like crap today. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
like, right. So like, I will take responsibility for that. Now, and so I wouldn't even consider that self sabotage because it was like, that would have been a choice that I
Right.
made before I opened the first beer.
Yes. Yeah.
But and I would have had a reason like that I at least
Right.
justified in my own head of like why that's important because I understand like what that cycle looks like. So then you go, all
Hmm.
right, but going forward then it's like taking responsibility for your actions that like I did that, then you can name it and be like, okay, you know what, I'm recognizing that now is like that is self-sabotage. I'm doing that to myself. That feels pretty crappy, right? The results of this every time are the same and I want to do better. And so I'm going to start with these little micro things, like micro
Hmm.
actions of changing some of the things I'm going to do. I'm going to ask myself, how can I set myself up for success? When I catch myself self sabotaging, I'm going to be honest about that. And I'm going to be like, and I'm going to name it that this is self sabotage.
Hmm.
And if you start doing that and you're like, oh, here's all the ways I'm self sabotaging, like, I really don't think that change is possible until you name it and say what, like, recognize it and being honest with yourself about it. Like, at least long term, maybe you can change it like on the one day or something. But like, as far as making like a lifelong habit of
On.
going forward, of like setting yourself up for success, aiming the ways that you self sabotage, which will be different than how Mikki and I do
Hmm.
it, right?
Yeah.
And so by the way, we should wrap this up. I think it's like we've
Yeah,
been
we
going
should.
on for like like 75 minutes. But like yeah, like can we ask our audience for some ways like that you like can like I feel like Mikki and I we were somewhat self-reflective here in telling you like what we do to self-sabotage or what we have done in the past and like what we recognize. I would be really curious, like
Hmm.
how have you done it as a listener here? Like tell us what what's your version of self-sabotage, what does that look like, and sharing it out loud or writing it down,
Hmm.
sharing it with us will make it very concrete and like it'll be like a flashing red light next time you go to do it. If you name it and start talking about it, your awareness is now shining on that and you're way
Hmm.
more likely to break the habit for yourself when you name it
Absolutely.
and have
I
somebody
agree.
who's potentially holding you
Yeah.
accountable, to that thing, right? So like if you tell us,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I'd be
So
curious when we've
yeah.
all got
And
them.
so it's not the last thing that I want to say too is like if you find yourself self-sabotaging, you're not a bad person,
Mm-mm.
right? Like what you're doing is you're protecting. It's a
Yeah.
self-protection mechanism. Like you're protecting yourself somehow from something like from some result that you're afraid of, like
Hmm.
whether that's a fear of success or failure or whatever the thing
Hmm.
is. Like it is a self-protection thing. And I guess like I don't want to go on for another hour and a half since I'm not going to share all these stories right now, but like the freedom that comes about when you're able to just be human and like recognize yourself for like your faults and your successes and like all the things and just know that like all the things good and bad like that's life. It's just like
Yep.
that's how it is. And
Yeah.
when you tried and it something didn't work out the way you wanted and you gave a good effort on it, that's like, well, now you know what doesn't work, so great, right? Next time, try something else. And when you can do that without self judgment and without it meaning that, like, oh, I'm a bad person, or, yep, mom was right, I'll never make anything of myself, like, or whatever the thing is, like, when you can, like, let go of all that baggage and just, like, live your life and be unafraid to try and unafraid to fail. Like, when you're unafraid to fail, you're a dangerous person,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Because you're like, it's
Absolutely.
cool. I'm just going to try. And if I fail, I fail, whatever. And I'll
Right.
try again next time with a
Yeah.
different approach. Like, that is the way. So, yeah, just recognize that your self sabotage is a self protection mechanism that's coming from some source. And if you can get to the bottom of that, you're way more likely to find success in whatever definition of like what that success means for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't have anything else. That was words of wisdom right there. So we'll leave off. But as always, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, listeners, if you got any topics, please do share. We're always open to hearing what you guys want to hear about. So yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Take care.